For PsychCentral.com, I'm Summer Boretsky. And normally in my videos, I don't really explain a whole lot about myself. I find something on PsychCentral.com that's useful to you, and I present it. But today is going to be a little bit different. I have panic disorder, and I struggle with anxiety a lot. And I know that on the internet there are dozens and dozens, well, hundreds and hundreds, really, perhaps even thousands, of articles with tips and tricks on how to handle anxiety and worry and panic. And it can be anxiety-inducing in and of itself to look through all of those lists and all of those suggestions. So what I've done for today is I've found 4 different articles on PsychCentral.com that list ways to reduce anxiety. Now, I don't necessarily agree with all the tips and techniques, but from each of those 4 articles, I've taken my favorite tip or technique, and I'm going to share those with you today. Now, these are tips and techniques that you can actually use right now to handle a situation that you're anxious about or worrying about. Now, the first thing that's really helped me with my anxiety and my panic is recognizing triggers. If you get anxious every once in a while and you're not really sure why, you might want to start noting things like where you're at when the anxiety begins to occur, what's on your mind, what's going on in your personal life, what types of relationships do you have at that moment, were you just talking to your mother, your friend, your significant other. Okay, and to give you a personal example of trigger identification, here's what happened to me when I was a sophomore in college. That's when my panic disorder first developed. That's when I had my first panic attack. And then after that first attack, I kept getting panic attacks randomly. And I have randomly in quotes because I thought it was random at the time. I didn't realize exactly what was triggering me until I really took note of the situation and what was going on when the attack would occur. And you know what my trigger turned out to be? Thinking of panic. So every time I began to worry about the fact that I'd had a panic attack before, and I would just have the word panic attack go through my head, and it only really had to be there for 5 or 10 seconds for me to start getting worked up inside. And if I weren't being very self-reflective, I probably wouldn't have noticed that in and of itself was a trigger, and I might have gone on thinking that panic attacks were coming completely randomly. So if you're finding yourself feeling anxious or excessively worrying about something, when you're feeling good enough to sit down and think about it, jot down a couple notes about the situation, and that'll help you to track your triggers over time. Okay, the second anxiety and worry management technique that I have found to actually work from a patient perspective is repeating your worry until you are, quote, bored silly. Now, it might sound weird at first to repeat your worry over and over. You might think, okay, doesn't that make me think about it more? Doesn't that make me worry further? That might not be the case. Here's my personal example on this one. I have 2 good examples. First, I did biofeedback a couple years ago in order to try and manage my anxiety and my panic. And if you're not familiar with biofeedback, there's a lot of great resources on the internet that will, explain it in detail. But generally, what happens is they attach sensors to your fingers that measure your skin conductance, which is your sweat, your temperature, your heart rate, and then sometimes there's a little band that goes around your belly that measures your breathing, your diaphragmatic breathing. And so all of those wires lead into a computer program that outputs a graph of your own real-time physiological sensations. And I guess the goal of doing that is to see your anxiety on a screen and then learn how to control it by watching those graphs. So anyway, I was in biofeedback, and I was trying to calm myself down, which is really difficult when you're looking at your own anxiety on a screen. But the therapist mentioned some sentence that had the word panic attack in it. And as I mentioned before, just thinking about panic attacks is one of my triggers. So as soon as she said that, I noticed my heart rate starting to get faster. And I noticed that my hands started to get sweaty. So what I did in my next biofeedback session was I sat there, hooked up to, all the sensors, and I repeated the word panic attack over and over and over again in my head until I saw myself starting to calm down. I repeated it until it became a nonsense word, a nonsense phrase to me. And I think it helped. Okay, and my second example for repeating your worry until you're bored silly is this. For the longest time, I could not drive through the Lehigh Tunnel. It's this highway tunnel that goes on the Pennsylvania Turnpike near Allentown, Pennsylvania. And I had a panic attack in that tunnel, and ever since then, I really, really avoided it. And I knew I shouldn't be avoiding it. So what I did, in order to kind of get myself used to the idea of driving through the tunnel again, I went to YouTube, and I found somebody who posted, for one reason or another, just a first-person video of them driving their vehicle through the tunnel. And I was in grad school at the time, and I remember finding this video and just putting it on repeat and watching it over and over and over again on YouTube until I was bored. And, you know, it's not like it cured me. I couldn't go in the tunnel right away, but it really was a great first step in, you know, letting me build up the courage to start driving through the tunnel again with a partner in the car, and then finally, eventually, a couple months later, by myself. Okay, item number 3 that has actually helped me with anxiety and worry before. Ask yourself if worrying will change the outcome of the situation. Maybe you're worried about some drama going on at work. Maybe you're worried about an upcoming test in school, or, you know, some kind of family situation that's, I don't know, a little bit awkward or uncomfortable. Really put in your mind what you're worrying about right now and ask yourself, does worrying about that situation make things any better? Sometimes worrying is helpful. I mean, let's think about school here, and let's say you have an exam coming up next week. If you're a little bit worried, you know, about how you're going to do on that exam, that worry is probably going to drive you to do positive things, like, you know, study, and you'll end up doing well. However, there are times when worrying is not an effective thing. Let's say, for example, you already took the test. You took the test yesterday, and it's going to take about a week for you to get your grade back from your professor. Does it make sense to worry then? Will worrying change the outcome if you've already taken the exam? It won't. You have no control. You just have to sit there and wait for the exam to come back. If you haven't taken the exam yet, then worrying could change the outcome, so long as you don't go overboard with your worries. So if you find yourself in a position where you're worrying, the worrying that's bothering you right now, if you find yourself in a position where that worrying will not change the outcome of whatever your future holds, whether that be a test, a promotion, or any other stressor that's going on in your life, then it might be time to let that worry go. And finally, the fourth and last anxiety and worry management technique that has actually really worked for me is kind of stepping out of yourself and looking at your situation as if you're another person. So that sounds kind of complicated. Let me make that a little bit more simple. Let's say there's a thunderstorm coming your way and you're really afraid of lightning. And not only are you afraid of lightning, you're afraid that lightning will strike a tree, a tall tree in your backyard, and that tree might, fall over onto your house and injure you. And, so that's a good example of worry that's, a little, it starts off being rational, but then it grows more irrational as you progress. When you're in that situation and you're scared, you don't necessarily have somebody next to you saying, oh, it's okay, there's nothing to worry about, it's just a storm, it'll pass over, trees aren't going to fall. If you're anything like me, you're probably going to hype yourself up even more and start thinking, oh God, what if? What if a tree does fall on the house? What if the roof caves in? Oh my God, I'm going to have to pay for that. What if it hits me? What if it hits one of the pets or one of the kids? Or, and you can really, really go crazy on this cycle of very fast thinking. So the goal of number 4 is to pretend that your friend is afraid of lightning, or a family member or some other loved one of yours is afraid of lightning, afraid of the storm, afraid of the tree falling on their house or apartment. What would you say to comfort them? If someone really came to you with a concern and they were really worried about this happening, you probably wouldn't say, "Oh my God, Jen, yeah, you're right, a tree might fall on your house. Lightning is probably going to strike you, or, something in your backyard," and you're not going to say that, When we calm other people in our lives, we tend to be more gentle with them than we are with ourselves. We say something like, "Oh no, Jen, it's going to be okay. Don't worry, plenty of storms have come through. Let's see, the likelihood of lightning striking in your backyard is very low, and even if it does, it doesn't mean a tree is going to fall, and even if a tree falls, it doesn't mean it's going to fall on your house, and even if it falls on your house, it doesn't mean it's going to hurt you," and so on. We're a lot better at saying calming things to friends and family than we are to ourselves. So here's what I want you to do about the situation that's causing you excessive worry and anxiety right now. I want you to get out a piece of paper and pretend your friend, a good close friend of yours, is having the same concern. What would you say to them to make them feel better? You're going to write that down, and you're going to tuck it away. And then tomorrow or the next day or next week, when you find yourself worrying about your situation again, you can take out what you wrote down and find some level of comfort in it. Now, I recognize that everybody is different and these techniques might not be as helpful for you as they've been for me. And if that's the case, that's fine. Let me know what kind of techniques you'd like to see covered in future PsychCentral.com videos. And if you want to check out more of the anxiety management techniques that I waded through to find these 4 favorites of mine, you can take a look at the 4 links below this video and check out each of those blog posts. Also, if you would like PsychCentral.com's blog posts about anxiety and many other mental health related issues to come up on your Facebook newsfeed, you can join our Facebook fan page by going to facebook.com/PsychCentral and clicking the like button. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this week's video, and I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. See you next time.